I moved without thought, instinct guiding me. As I tilted my body toward his, the air grew heavier thick. With something I couldn't name but felt everywhere, his presence surrounded me. Solid and unyielding as I leaned closer, the heat of him radiating through the space between us the moment stretched. Timeless and taut until the distance closed completely. My skin brushed his, a whisper of a touch that burned like a brand. His hand moved, skimming the curve of my shoulder down the length of my arm and back up again. Slow and deliberate, I inhaled sharply, my body trembling under the weight of his touch. There was no urgency, no rush, only the maddeningly slow build of tension that coiled tighter with every passing second. His fingertips traced patterns along my skin, the softness of the gesture contrasting with the intensity of his presence. I let my head rest lightly against his chest, my ear pressed to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. It grounded me, that sound, a steady anchor in the storm we had created. His hands moved with more certainty, now exploring, discovering, and claiming parts of me I hadn't known, could feel so alive. Time blurred as the boundaries between us dissolved. Every touch was a question, and every shiver of my body was the answer. The softness of his lips against my temple sent shock waves through me, each press of his mouth igniting a fire that burned away everything else. I sank deeper into the connection, letting it consume me, letting it drown out the fear, the doubt, the loneliness that had ruled me for so long. This wasn't love. I knew that this was survival wrapped in desire, necessity. Add in something darker and more primal. When it was over, I stayed for a moment, my head resting against his shoulder, my body still humming with the echoes of what had transpired. The silence between us was heavy, but not oppressive, filled with the unspoken understanding of what we'd done, as I dressed, smoothing out the wrinkles in my blouse. I avoided looking at him directly. I didn't need to see his face to know that this wouldn't be the last time back in my apartment. The draft still lingered, the cracks in the walls still whispered, but the notice was gone from my door. My life hadn't changed. Not really, but the power I'd felt in his presence clung to me like a second skin. For the first time in a long time, I felt something other than helpless. I felt alive. The apartment always felt like a tomb, cold and unyielding. The cracks in the walls whispered secrets I didn't want to hear. The drafty windows carried accusations from the outside world, and the silence wrapped itself around me like a noose. Loneliness was an old companion, but desperation had become a new one, its claws scratching louder every day when I found the notice under my door. My stomach churned with the familiar dread, final warning rent, due in 7 days, 7 days to find a miracle, 7 days before my isolation became homelessness. I tried not to think about him at first, about Mr. Carter, but the thought crept in anyway, insidious and sly, reminding me of the way his eyes lingered when we crossed paths. I told myself I was imagining it, that his interest was just a trick of my wishful thinking. But then again, wasn't that the only weapon I had left? The seed planted itself in the fertile soil of my despair. I hated the idea, hated what it said about me, but it grew anyway, a stubborn vine, twisting around my resolve. I'd seen him watching me before, his gaze heavier than the air in the tiny hallways of this crumbling building. He was always composed, but there was a tension in the way he looked at me, a subtle hunger that I'd ignored. I couldn't afford to ignore it anymore. The next day I peeled back the layers I usually hid under a fitted blouse clung to my body, its fabric soft and inviting against my skin. My jeans hugged me in ways that felt almost illicit, the stretch of them emphasizing the curves I usually concealed. I let my hair fall loose, brushing against my shoulders, catching the light as I moved. My knock on his door was steady, but my insides quaked. This wasn't me. This wasn't who I was. But necessity has a way of erasing the lines we think we'll never cross. I stepped into his apartment, the air inside warmer than my own, scented faintly with cedar and something musky I couldn't name. He motioned for me to sit, and I did, perching on the edge of his couch like a bird ready to take flight, but I didn't flee. I leaned forward, slow and deliberate, feeling the faint shift of my blouse as it followed my body's movements. I felt his gaze like a physical touch trailing over me, itating in places that made my skin flush. My hand found his knee, a tentative resting place testing the waters. His stillness was a response in itself. The electricity between us was palpable, a silent current that buzzed louder than any words ever could. I shifted closer, the space between us shrinking, until I could feel the warmth of his body. My breath hitched my heart pounding in my chest, but I didn't stop when his hand moved to mine. The connection was magnetic, a charge that surged from his touch and ignited something dormant inside me. His grip was firm but unhurried, as if he was savoring the feel of my skin against his. I felt every callus, every ridge, each detail of him imprinting itself on me.